We're recording now.
Yeah.
Father, if you'd like to say a prayer before we start.
A prayer to the Holy Spirit. Βασιλεύ Φοράνη, παράκλητο πνεύμα της αληθείας, ο πανταχού παρών και τα πάντα πληρών. Ο θησαυρός των αγαθών και ζωής και εργός, αρθά και σκήνωσον ανεμήν και καθάρισον εμάς. Μου πας κυρίδος και σώσον αγαθέτας ψυχάς ημών. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Father. So I'm going to introduce you both really quickly, and then we'll jump into these questions here. Father Nikolaos Loudovikos is a priest, professor, psychologist, and author. He's the editor of the Analogia Journal, has published a number of books in Greek and English, and has taught at Cambridge, Durham, and the University of Ioannina, among others. Dr. Timothy Patitsas is the former dean of Hellenic College and professor of ethics at Holy Cross. He's the founder of Beauty First Films and the author of The Ethics of Beauty. He has written papers on gender and organic complexity and studies liturgical forms of order. So I wanted to start us off with a sort of broad topic that relates to the first volume of your Analogical Identities, which is, Father Loudovikos, which is the relationship between Christianity and nihilism, which, to maybe put it concisely as a question, did Christianity create nihilism, and how does Christianity conquer nihilism?
Yes, indeed. I think that somehow nihilism was incubated in the womb of Christian mysticism. In the sense that in such a case, Christianity becomes ecstatic. In the book, I make a sharp distinction between ecstasies out of nature, which smacks of Neoplatonism or Gnosticism or such things, and ecstasies of nature itself. This is, historically speaking, these have been both ways of understanding the incarnation, and also the purpose of the incarnation, which is important. If the purpose of the incarnation has to do with this outlet, this ecstasy out of, okay, then we annihilate a great part of creation. We're material creatures. For the fathers, we know that even soul is not purely spiritual. It's a form of matter itself, very subtle matter, of course. That means that we are material when we speak of mind. First and second, of course, we know that without the bodily dimension, we cannot construct, we cannot understand the world, we cannot use our senses, we cannot be in contact with this world, with this world. But yet we are worldly creatures. If incarnation is understood as a sort of outlet, as, for example, is the understanding of assumption by Augustine or by Origen, and these are, teacher and disciple indeed. That means Christ comes here to teach and then leaves in order to show that he belongs to another kingdom, and that means that what is somehow he was disguised in order to teach or speak to us, okay, and then he leaves. If we do not have this possibility of transformation or enhancing nature, then we become nihilistic. That's very simple. And it is strange. This phenomenon for me is very strange. In a way, I can say publicly that I was an atheist before, precisely because of this. Because I did believe, along with Nietzsche, that Christianity is a Platonism for the people. A way of getting out of the complexities of nature and the meaning of nature. So in this way, we see Nietzsche so reevaluating, discovering nature This is Nietzschean nihilism. He annihilates the Christian metaphysics and puts you this reversion, okay, the truth and what lies before this ecstasy, And in this sense, Nietzsche is someone who wants to correct Christianity in this sense. Okay. And in this sense, the direct teacher of Nietzsche is Augustine himself, or Origen. Okay. Yes.
We have a priest.
This is.
Yes, that's very helpful. There's a priest in the States named Father Stephen DeYoung, and he's been talking recently about reevaluating the bodily resurrection, and he uses Nietzsche as a foil. And the point that he makes is that rationality, like eschatological rationality, is directly connected to materiality.
Let me make a parenthesis. Nietzsche is not only this one; it's something else also. He is the successor of Augustine in his understanding of the will, as ecstatic will. Curiously enough, is both. In a sense, he transforms the Augustinian understanding of the will. He accepts the Augustinian understanding of the will as it was changed by Descartes. Descartes spoke of this ecstatic understanding of the will. We're getting out of nature, okay, but it makes it autonomous. It makes it autonomous because, okay, God has autonomous will, so we have an autonomous will. Nietzsche is the inheritor of this. He takes this Nietzsche, this Augustinian or Cartesian understanding of the ecstatic will, okay, but he transforms the field where he applies it. Now the field is the bodily existence, and transcendence becomes self-transcendence. Okay, it's a transcendence within human selfhood, within the material selfhood that we are, and so we have the will to power and the superhuman, the overman. Okay, Übermensch. Nietzsche is both against Augustine and pro-Augustinian in this sense, because his understanding of the ecstatic will through Descartes changes this ecstasy, making it an internal ecstasy. If we read Deleuze, we understand this very, very clearly. An internal ecstasy within this bodily existence. That means that we have to recreate humanity, but in a sense without limits. It's a self-creation, okay, within a constant internal self-transcendence. Okay, in this way, yes, Christianity, nihilism, was incubated. Yes, in a Christian when Christianity becomes ecstatic, we have the germs of nihilism, in my view. Ecstatic in this sense, ecstasy out of, not of nature itself. Okay, not of nature itself, because Maximus says clearly that with the incarnation we have two things. Because we have the affirmation of nature. God created it, so he accepts it, he affirms. And second, we have the possibility of creation to act or be acted upon beyond its limits. But it's nature who does this. Nature acts beyond its limits. Nature is acted upon beyond its limits. We don't have, this ecstasy out of nature. We do not overcome nature. We do not need to overcome nature. If we overcome nature, that means that we deny that nature was God's work, as Dr. Patitsas says somewhere.
Well, Father Nicholas, can you say? I mean, I know I'm supposed to be maybe answering the same question, but can you describe in the life of an ascetic the way in which that ecstasy is affirming nature, is not a beyond nature, or in the life of, let's say, a contemporary saint? Can you give an example, some concrete examples of that?
You need to give examples, because theoretically I'm totally convinced about that. And yes, we met saints in recent times.
Well, I don't mean for evidentiary reasons, but just to know what it looks like, just to in practice. Like how do we make sure in our aesthetic life we're affirming nature and not obliterating it?
Giving meaning to all material beings instead of just overcoming them. Divine meaning. And discern the divine meaning of everything. Discern, even for bodily existence, for sexual life. I remember now St. Porphyrius, I met him when I was a young psychologist. And I remember him speaking about the spirituality of sexual intercourse. How mysteriously this sexual intercourse reveals spiritual secrets about human existence. And he was an ascetic himself. So, yeah, asceticism, at least in the Orthodox Church, is a way to dealing in a divine way of dealing with things, protecting beings, being in, for example, I remember now Father Paisius on the Holy Mountain having encounters and keeping snakes, feeding them. I saw this with my own eyes sometime, I was very frightened because they called them by name and they gave them milk. So what are you doing here, Father? Well, we said, it's absolutely natural, you have to be in sympathy with them. You see how all people, chase them and and crush their hands. Now they're creatures of God. It's precisely the opposite of this horrible image of a monophysite ascetic, who denies. Maximus again is very clear on that. I have this in my last book of Technopithecus and Truth. This passage where he says that, look, what is dangerous not things themselves, but your denial to find their divine meaning. And in that case, he writes, trying to onus is in risks to ενσχεθεί τις επιφανίες των αισθητών, to be trapped on the surfaces of things. And in this case, the nous becomes idolatrous. And that's the danger. Not beings themselves, but not to see the divine purpose behind them. So in this way, the asceticism means to understand, it's a very poetic account of asceticism, which is, for me, the very core of the Orthodox asceticism. If it is something, it's precisely this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least
Joseph, can I say something about this question too of nihilism and
please,
where it's coming from? Because it just very roughly, without great analysis, just in my lived experience in growing up in the West, it seems to me like the purpose of ritual and sacramental life, or at least an effect of them, is to fill the world with meaning, and that when sacramental life runs off the rails, that we have an irresolvable war between nominalism and realism. And that's often, with certain caveats or qualifications, what it feels like to me, the let's say conservative liberal split in politics. You can see this on gender, that the view on the left is so extremely nominalist. The feeling is that, any kind of fixed definition of things would be such a violation of the individualist will or freedom. But I think there's an analog to this, the liberal conservative thing, certainly, and it has played out historically. It's kind of a Protestant Roman Catholic divide as well. And there's something about the realist position that when we look deep into the abyss of the nominalists, which seems to be to us to be nihilism, that is attractive. But in practice, an excessive realism leads to its own kind of confusion and loss of meaning. Somehow this is related to flaws in sacramental theology and Eucharistic theology. I don't, certainly Schmemann has some kind of ideology of this, but it seems to me this is the difficult balance that we have for the last millennium in the West, that we're drawn to either nominalist or realist extremes. I think in contemporary politics, the conservatives do a better job of keeping some kind of a balance. But I think that it's, except when it's time to go to war, and then there becomes in the exercise of political will, human life and nations and particularities of culture and place, just are obliterated. It seems to me that some kind of recovery of sacramental theology, reinfuses the world with meaning and allows both particularity and some kind of law, some kind of balance or fullness there. I guess it's pretty vague what I just said, but
it's not just vague. I totally agree. I mean, our Eucharistic ontology, that was the title of my book. It was published with your press there. Maximus the Confessor, of being as dialogical reciprocity. This is precisely what I'm talking about. In this sense, I totally agree with you. Yes, absolutely. That this ontology has to be, in a sense, Eucharistic. That means, in a sense, that for me, Eucharistic ontology explains Maximus's thought on the matter. In a sense, in the Eucharist, we have logi given to us as gifts, and then given back through the Eucharist to God, proskomizodes. He uses the word proskomidi. That means that you offer back, and that you get them back. And in this sense, we have if you allow me, an enhancing of the word, step by step. The parenthesis, in this sense, we're not afraid of the artificial intelligence because we have enhancing already. And we know how to lead, how to understand artificial intelligence. What are the limits put there? While in the Nietzschean perspective, there's no way to put limits. There's no way, no criteria. We don't have any. Because all sorts of understanding of the will is this constant self, determination and self surpassing. I mean, that. No one can, no one can put say an external meaning on that. It is the meaning itself, this expansion, this extension. Yeah. Thank you for this. I totally agree with you. I like this perspective. You know how much.
Somehow, I mean, somehow asceticism is or is meant to be within the church, is meant to be a sacramental act or a participation in the sacramental approach to life that we infuse our lives with meaning and everything that we're, as you said, everything that we name. I mean, I have in mind Roy Rappaport's Ritual and Religion and the Making of Humanity, which is written very much from an agnostic perspective. He's just an anthropologist. He's not a theologian, but his sense is that in order for language, for words to have stable meaning, they have to be ritualistically enforced, and somehow this is true. I think of asceticism. Our words of, let's say, love for our spouse, for those words to have stable meaning, they have to be undergirded by some kind of an ascetic approach to marriage or to daily life. But that's just one example. I mean, it's true of everything. For any kind of stable identity, this ritual has to take place, at fractal scale, at higher, across the hierarchy.
Absolutely, I have coined a term on this in my book Church in the Making, which was published with Vladimir Press in 2016. The term interlinguality. I put in discussion there Maximus with Wittgenstein. Interlinguality. I mean, and this is very close to what I call analogical relation with God. But that means I don't know if this is one of the next questions, but it comes naturally now. When we say analogical relation, for Dennis the Areopagite, this is synergy. For Maximus, it's dialogical reciprocity. For Palamas, is inter-subjective synergy. Okay, and that means for me, finally, intermeaningfullness. I mean, interlinguality, a way of inter-subjectivity in the making, as an expression of the will to consubstantiality, will to be together, will to form one body, one existence. This is ingenious, of course. This comes from Palamas and Maximus, and with the Areopagite as a background. Yeah, absolutely, yes. I think that by using in this way, in dialogue with modern philosophy and psychology, perhaps, the patristic material, we can meet absolutely very contemporary issues, anthropological issues.
I think it goes to science.
I prefer speaking, for example, for intermeaningfullness instead of speaking of theosis. Because in this way we understand what theosis is about. Theosis is not just to abandon creation. When we speak of theosis, with the Platonic vocabulary that we all use still in the West, we mean something which is very close to meeting the Brahman or meeting the One, putting in language. Okay, that means leaving things behind. With intermeaningfullness, we realize that it is this word which they fight, And of course, we see also the cross as I mean, the essential sacrifice that we have to go beyond our philautia, beyond our analysis or meta-analysis, as I call it. Today, we don't have any more narcissism. For me, as a psychologist, we have meta-narcissism. That means it's a narcissism without pleasure, very close to autism, not in the clinical sense. Autism. but in the existential sense.
Mm.
The narcissist wants to have relationships and to control them. The meta-narcissist, in a sense, lies beyond relationship. You know, it does not need the other at all, in a sense. Okay, in order to realize himself, to make himself, you know, I don't know if you can call it nominalism or whatever, but we see this in the psychotherapeutic encounters, or even in the faction of the spiritual fatherhood. Okay, we meet people that they ignore the other. I don't know if I coined the term the other's otherness, not the otherness, but the other's otherness. They're not aware of that, as if it does not exist. What is the other? That thing, you know, beings just passing before my consciousness, you know. Okay. But the other's otherness, no, they need to have a key to somehow to understand the other. No. Of course, this sometimes leads to depression, because yes, you don't have the other.
Can I bring up your paper on Saint Sophrony, Ecstasy as Descent? You talk about basically this understanding of theosis as will to consubstantiality. And Dr. Tim,
yes,
you criticize also sort of individualistic forms of theosis, postulating rather like a liturgical, communal intermeaningfullness.
In this book, the Analogia Journal, there is a chapter where I put Danish theory opposite in dialogue with modern psychologists, modern psychology, and modern phenomenology, in order to show that for him, theosis, if it is something, has to do with what I call, I don't know if it's right or wrong, so much distribution, that much participation. That means we have, in modern American psychotherapy, we have two main trends. The one, Carl Rogers, for example, okay, this school of somehow stressing the individuality. Be yourself, okay, discover yourself, you know, all the stuff, you know, to somehow enhance selfhood. And on the other hand, we have the tendency of working with groups, open yourself to the others. You know, we see that they're up again when he speaks of personality. We have both, in a sense, participation as distribution. So much distribution, so much participation. The verification of true participation is the distributing of things. These are very useful. We speak of patristic theology at the very same moment. We solve very contemporary problems, psychological. The gap between individual psychology and group psychology, for example. This is it. We have both here. Distribution, so much distribution, that much participation. If you stop distributing, participation stops. Add in Gregory Palamas, you know, the Father Sophrony is a Palamite for me, God-forsakenness. For what reason? Precisely because you are alone, become alone. And God asks you, why are you alone? And Palamas says that we have two ways of ascending to God. The first is imaginary, it's through the mind. The second is with every kind of creature, all μεταπαντός είδους κτήσεως, είναι το κατοικώνα επικρυβωμένων ή, with every sort of creature in our hands, in order for the image of God to be verified, You see, these are revolutionary things. That means God does not accept you alone. You go there alone, say, who are you? I do not recognize you. I'm not alone. Why are you alone? And we see this in the lives also of modern saints. How much they were open. I mean, the real saints, not the elders that claimed to be, something. No. Some of the canonized saints that we have in the 20th century, we saw this very clearly, that they existed for us in a sense, without stopping being themselves. They were both participating and distributing. Distributing, participating. Living for you and be themselves at the same time. In this sense, yes, Father Sophrony, of course, is one of the inheritors of this hesychastic tradition. As I speak of hesychasm, once again, I wrote in my book that we have monophysite interpretation of hesychasm. Absolutely, yes, it's true. And this is very dangerous, very dangerous. Somehow, hesychasm is identified with a method of getting rid of things. Well, it's precisely the opposite. When Palamas speaks of the body, which has ensimenomenas pneumatikas diathesis, imprinted spiritual tendencies, that means the body wants to live its bodily life in a spiritual way. It's deeply poetic, deeply real, deeply human, and deeply divine at the same moment. We have to discover this dimension of Christianity, because if we have almost lost it today. Yeah. But this is what Christianity is about. Otherwise, we do not understand. We do not need Christianity for me. And I know that Dr. Patitsas agrees with it. I have read his book. Yeah. And I know.
And in my book, I'm trying to draw this analogy between the purification, illumination, deification sequence with the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and also with the Socratic transcendentals of beauty, goodness, and truth. And clearly, the summation of truth, that summative level, because it's not just beauty, goodness, truth, but it's beauty plus goodness plus truth. It's a concentric unfolding. But truth at this rhetorical level means that truth is experienced synodically. And even in Aristotle's Rhetoric, it's clear that rhetoric is important for these situations where the truth is not knowable by the individual, and it may not be knowable even by the collective, in the sense that rhetoric is useful for probabilistic situations. We're not sure what will happen if we take this or that course of action as a polis. And then we see that in the first council. It seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us that its truth is attained in this increasing intersubjectivity that you described so beautifully, Father Nicholas. But I think in my book I didn't anywhere say what you said, which is that this rhetorical synodality isn't just with other human beings or human beings and God, but it is with, as you point out, to my enlightenment, with the whole of creation. And Saint Amphilochios Makris, he said, very simply, "My children, I do not want paradise without you." And to assure them, but also as a sign of what paradise is, or what this paradisial spirit that he had is. In his childhood, we didn't put this in the film, but in his childhood, there was a kind of moment when he took some sort of a wild bird or something into the house, because he was a great lover of animals, and it got loose and destroyed a lot of his mother's special, housewares and things. Before she came into the house, he stopped her and he said, "Mother, if I died, wouldn't that be a terrible thing?" He sort of tried to set her up for the disaster that, at least she still had him. And, but that sense of, clearly that's the witness of the church, that this experience of truth comes in an embrace of the entire creation, not just human creation.
This is why I call it an ecclesiology of consubstantiality. That was the subtitle of my book with St. Vladimir's Church in the Making, and ecclesiology of consubstantiality. That means somehow consubstantiality is transmitted through Christ. We have two sorts of consubstantiality. The first belongs to the Divine Trinity. It's consubstantial. Okay, and this, Maximus says, following the Areopagite again, that this is transmitted to creation. In a sense, through the incarnation, every kind of creature is accepted, not only the human being, but also the irrational part of creation, the unconscious, I say, part of, the social part, everything. You see, in the West, all these things were scattered. The detached style of German idealism, say, the punctual self, as the English historians of philosophy call it. The I, the ego cogito, I. And this is a spiritual I. The I of John Locke, the I, the Kantian I, and the private nature and the I. This is why I have criticized my teacher and mentor, Zeulas, for putting, nature here as a burden of necessity and person here as freedom. Freedom from what? If you get free from nature, if you deny nature, you don't know why the incarnation is for. The incarnation is precisely to free nature, not to free person. You understand? Yeah, I think that you agree in this other way. I criticize Zeulas. I was known in the West for this, with my criticism for it, but and generals also. Because precisely they take this division, separation as granted. Person is not freedom. Person means that, according to Maximus, the person who commits the sin, not nature. And you have, on the contrary, to follow nature's divine law in order to meet God. Because, the misuse of nature does not destroy ontological nature. So, in the West, we have this detached selfhood and the efforts to bridge the gap between this and the real human existence. So we have the and also the human community. So this is why Marx is very important for the West, because it shows that you are connected with this community. Sure. Freud, very, very important, because he shows that this individual self-understanding, it's not real. You have a basement with full of unconscious instincts, which are rooted on your body, and so you have to deal with them. Otherwise, they deal with you, and they become your fate. This is the core of psychoanalysis. And of course, Darwin is very important because it shows that we are connected with creation, and so we don't have. This transcendent idealistic ego today is not plausible anymore. But on the other hand, we do not have patterns and forms in order to put it somewhere. And these patterns can be Maximus the Confessor, can be Gregory Palamas, in a sense, or a certain understanding of Thomas Aquinas, which tends toward that directions, but in a sense, just tends. There are some achievements there, but in this book I propose a Palamite reading of Aquinas and a Thomistic reading of Palamas in order to show this, how they are interconnected. Indeed, Thomas tends, in my view, toward this, but it cannot achieve without Palamite complementarity, in a sense. But this means that we have to make a reinterpretation of some things. Otherwise, things become dangerous.
Father Nicholas, if I may, oh no, go ahead, please finish that thought.
No, I'm saying when I converted, I was baptized, but as an atheist. When I converted, I felt very important as a psychoanalyst because they realized that some people there did not want to deal with their nature, their conflicts, and thought that not the ascetics, the academic theologians, somehow, or some others who came from the brotherhoods. The brotherhoods in Greece, the brotherhoods of Protestant inspiration. So in a sense, they denied the nature in order to get out from it says half the Maximian truth. Maximus says affirmation of nature and ecstasis of nature itself. So they take only the second part, ecstasis of nature, but out of itself, not of nature itself, but out of it. And so this is what the most dangerous thing that we one can discern in modern Orthodox theology, in my view. And of course, the action is that we accept human nature as it is. These are the modernists. They have the first, the formers as their alibi. So they just accept nature as it is, without any perspective of enhancing, of getting out of its limits. There's two ways of understanding orthodoxy today, but they're both wrong. For me, Maximus and Palamas put those things together. So well, I don't know if this just discussing.
I think it seems to me that putting these things together in practice is always a miraculous event. I mean, because I see it, in the West. Even though you would describe let's say the progressive or liberal tendency as being more nominalist, but they are more realist in their discussion of the source of human agency, right? They embrace Freud, they embrace Darwin, they embrace Marx. They see that there are limits to human agency, or that human agency has, is socially embedded. Whereas the so-called realists on the right, who in many respects are more realist, have a fantasy many times of a human agency that is not dependent on one's racial setting, one's economic setting, one's class setting. And so in both cases, what you have, and I don't mean to be too critical, because as ideologies, you can point this out, but the individual holding the ideology, just like the individual person who's Protestant or Roman Catholic, is attempting a genuine synergy and is thinking that they're attaining it. But certainly, it looks very much like the conservative is in a sense a nominalist, because they imagine possessing some agency out of the sky. It isn't socially determined or something. So to overcome these of course, I don't want to get trapped in politics. I mean, it is what it is, and maybe it's necessary. Well, in the Anglo-American world, politics are run like our system of justice. I mentioned this in the book, and it's adversarial. One side is supposed to argue for you have agency, and the other side is supposed to say, you're a victim of moral luck. And they're both right, and we kind of fight it out in an adversarial way, and this makes the social wedding somewhat difficult because we approach the wedding liturgy of civilization through divorce proceedings, essentially. It makes it hard to achieve it. But when you see it, when you see it in action, when someone has this proper balance between what Edith Hamilton called, the spirit, the individual, and then the mind and the universal, it's kind of miraculous. It's quite a thing, and you see this especially now in gender, because it's really hard for people to work this out somehow.
Yeah, once again, I agree with you, and this is what I wanted to say previously, that if you want this sort of holism, you need to put it in a certain frame, certain context. And today, this is what is precisely lacking in the West. I mean, the secular stuff, they do not have this matrix, they don't have this way of understanding and put together all these dimensions of a human being. Precisely because, they're divided. For some of them, soul is something that exists. For some of them, soul is not something that does not exist. For some of them, what is beyond experience exists. For some of them, what is beyond does not exist. So when they come to the question of, say, ethics, which is somehow encompasses all these things together and gives them a meaning, you have to go there. They do not have common sources for this ethics anymore. And so that means, in this way, we mean that we have a sort of emotionalism here. We don't have moral sources anymore. And in this way, we cannot understand all these things together as showing to a certain purpose, which can be accepted by all. I don't know if I'm clear. And that is, for me, that this is why the West needs to discover again its Christian and perhaps Greek sources through Christianity. Again, in order to say, for example, speak of a general purpose of human society, or of human history. Otherwise, this becomes, as Popper said, a history of power. Nothing more, nothing less than that. And that means that in this way, we do not have humanity as humanity anymore, but this today, in today's mentality, we have to add things to this to create a sort of enhancing of this humanity. And this enhancing can be achieved in two senses. The first is the totalitarianism, where you have the human nature in an ideal form, and you just destroy all those who deny this perfection, this perfect humanity that is accepted by totalitarianism. Or we have the biological enhancing. In both cases, we do not have an understanding of the sources of truth. What we do is always, just our choice. I choose this sort of man, and this is the ideal man, and I choose this perspective, which is for me the only perspective. But in both cases, what is behind is just the will to power. I don't know if these things are clear, but I'm just making a comment about what you said previously.
Well, in Edith Hamilton's, discussion of classical Greece, at least for a century there, in her vision, it's about a century. Some people, mark it as 50 years from the Battle of Plataea to the Peloponnesian War, but roughly 50 or whatever things get going. But she says their enduring value of classical Greece is that, like no other people in history, in her view, they balanced the universal with the particular, and then she says something similar about the Romans. She said the Romans achieved a similar balance in one area, and that was law, and that's why, and justice, and that's why they're the world's teachers of law. But to the extent that anyone achieves this balance, because I think it can be in a life or in a particular novel or in a work of art, that's God. It's always a miracle, and so when those miracles happen, the value is eternal. Or I feel that in art, high art is somehow trying to conform nature to these Platonic ideals, and folk art is somehow trying to conform these Platonic ideals to nature, and both those arts are legitimate. But other attempts at art, and in some cases, like the Parthenon, the Alhambra, it's clear that both things are happening. It's a work of high art and a work of folk art, because the architects of the Parthenon, didn't get the math perfect. They fudged the math so that the person, the average person seeing it, would see the perfection that isn't exactly there. I mean, they understood if they did it mathematically perfect, it would look off. And I think there's different even rooms in the Alhambra that are like this. So those things are so miraculous and summon us to such admiration on a permanent basis, right? Like, they are theophanies. Somehow God let those people, those architects, of that kind of, the individual and the natural, the nature, coinciding in that way.
Can I ask, with what you, sorry, Dr. Tim, with what you said about Polemos and bringing all of created nature with you into the experience of the Eucharist, does that apply also to what Dr. Tim is talking about with, these theophanic balances that can be achieved in art and things like that?
Yes, I agree that the art can be an expression of all these things. Yes, yeah. Speaking of the ancients, the ancient Greek metaphysics, I think that what is important for us today is two things. The first is that nature is concrete, exists, it's steady, it is divine. Logos in nature, Heraclitean way of understanding things, and of course very close to the Stoic understanding. And this is why the Greeks, when they wanted to create a meaningful ethics, meaningful way of understanding the self, they studied nature, from some pre-Socrates to Aristotle. This is the first. The second, which is very important, is this the existence of the one, of the Logos, that everything is unified, everything works together. This deep dialectics of things. This is what are pressures. Now, when we come to Christianity, we see that in a sense, this is accepted. In a sense, it is given new, very important perspectives. Nature is divine, again, and very meaningful. Not because, God lives by essence in its nature, but because God creates nature and directs nature and his providence, everything that we figure. So, on the other hand, humans are not just part of this nature, but images of an absolute being, which is beyond nature. So, for the first time, we have a new understanding of freedom. Freedom in the ancient Greek philosophy is cosmological freedom. You have to do what nature asks you to do, otherwise you will be destroyed. This is the ancient Greek tragedy, the tragodia. In the Christian understanding, you give meaning to the creatures, but this meaning is given to you by God. So you transfer God, transfer this absolute through you. Is transferred in creation, and that means that you are, in a sense, free from creation because you are the image, but at the same time you are the priest of this creation. You are the divine artist, if you like. Giving creation its final divine shape. And in this sense, you are co-creator. You are in such a synergy with God. God likes it to have someone who collaborates with him. And so you transmit divine consubstantiality, divine freedom, divine beauty, divine everything to creation, in a sense, making creation to progress in these things, according to God's will. And he uses you, he asks you to collaborate with him in order to bring forth all this beauty and all this wisdom. In this sense, freedom, Christian freedom, has to be united with this wisdom, God's wisdom, freedom plus wisdom, in order to bring forth, to generate all this continuous beauty, which is unended, that never ends. Don't forget that creation is huge, is absolutely, Once a monk, there was a saint, but totally unknown on the Holy Mountain, told me that, all these planets, he said, many of them are empty. Do you know why? So why? Because God wants them, the human race, to travel and, inhabit them. That's why? Yes, and create various different civilizations, new forms of life, new forms of existence, new forms of science. I was excited to hear by a monk, lost somewhere in the desert of the Holy Mountain. He said to me, yes, yeah, this expansion of wisdom, expansion of beauty, extension of beauty, extension of wisdom, extension of science, extension of divine freedom in wisdom and love. And in this sense, yes, man never ends. That's the patristic. According to Maximus, man does not have a beginning, it does not have an end. Anthropos anarchos και ατελεύτητος, without beginning, without end, without beginning in God's providence, and without ending in collaboration with Him. Yeah, this is the Stasimos speaking here.
Father Nick, oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, moving rest, how it's called by Maximus. You have rest, you have always new forms of understanding things, and nothing is exhaustible. Nothing can be exhausted. I was told this once by St. Porphyrius. He said to me, you know, this knowledge never ends. I said, how is this possible? Said, you know, it's the knowledge of freedom plus love. And you see always new aspects of things in the eternal life. And that means you have everything, and at the same time, everything is new. Everything is new. When we live, our humble life in Christ, I think that we understand it because everyone becomes new every day. You know, my friends, my wife, my children in Christ become new every day. I see, new aspects of them. From my friends, institutions, knowledge, things around me are illuminated, have a light coming from their times, coming from God Himself. And this is an experience of many, simple everyday Christians, regular Christians. That things are becoming new and new and new and new. You are in conflict with your wife, for example, and you start praying, and you see her in a different light. And you understand that her suddenly as a very precious and multidimensional creature. And you forgive everything, and you feel foolish because you blamed her before. Or you see your children and say, this is my children. You are my son, and you have to do this. And suddenly you see, through prayer, in the Eucharistic experience, this son, your son, as God's son, as a divine son, without end, without beginning. Where is going? And then everything becomes new, and you admire. I have a book now. I don't know if I finished it, if I'm going to finish it, and when. It's not purely academic, but it's called Admirers of God. Admirers of God. God is admired and likes very much of it. He's an erotic being. He is thirsty of being loved and being admired. And he admires us also, which is very important. God has a very, very good opinion for each of us, while the devil has a very bad view.
Yes.
If you listen to the devil talking about you, he will say that this man is that and that and that and that, and don't give a penny for them. Blah, blah, blah. If you listen to Christ speaking of you, he will say that he's an invaluable person, has many talents and many good things. And got such a deeply good heart, and everything is wonderful in him. And once again, we meet this in the saints. They, used to receive us in that way, with an open hand like this. Come here, dear son of God. Remember, Father Patius, παιδί του Θεού. Come here, παιδί του Θεού, child of God. And you were totally imperfect. You're just a silly boy, speaking psychologically. God is an idiot in general, And this is, we know this only through Christianity. Otherwise, and this is another difference, the ancient Logos is very wise and keeps his position. The Christian God is a loving God that somehow is betrayed by his love. It accepts us and accepts again and accepts again and accepts again all this pedagogy of our freedom in order to collaborate with him less or more and little more or little less in order to give creation its splendor, in his light. Okay,
I wanted to mention something, Father, connected to your background in psychology. I think this book, at least for an American audience, the Achilles in Vietnam is so foundational, because Jonathan Shea is describing the traumatized person who has reached the apotheosis of the berserker. And the berserker living is like one part God, one part animal. But Shea brings in Aristotle. He says, gods and animals can live outside the city, but human beings cannot. They are political. They are rhetorical. And
indeed, yeah.
This vision, this modern vision of the will as being so completely unrooted in intersubjectivity, or being too rooted in it. Either way, it's either a god or an animal, but it's not a human being. And the summons to Christ and the summons to this fullness of the vision of what a saint looks like is a summoning to the city, to our humanity. And when you see the alternative to try to pretend you're a god or pretend you're an animal, it's a hard row to hoe, and it's a very hard path. It's too much, and to come back, as you were saying a moment ago, to this balance is the good news. And to come out of, to come back to the city. Because for Christians and Jews, paradise is not a garden. Exactly. It's not a return to the garden, but it's a progress forward to the heavenly Jerusalem. And, this, to come back to a communion, and even political freedom is a kind of image of this, when we can approach something of a friendship with our political opponents, and speak to them of them and with them with respect, and not with this demonization. I think a little bit of satire is good. I think a little bit of mockery is helpful sometimes. Because we can see how absurd we're being, but not to go beyond that to a kind of cruelty or an ultimate excommunication so easily. In other words, what I'm trying to say is somehow this vision of which I think maybe is the humanistic vision, but this vision of a self that's so exalted, in the self-deification of aloneness, and it does, and at the same time it does lead to behavior that's worse than animals. Animals don't kill their same species opponents, and that's rare in competition. They fight until one surrenders. There isn't this mass obliteration that we practice.
Well, thank you for this. I appreciate all these things. I remember now in a public lecture of mine, which I gave some months ago. The title of this lecture was "Devil's Theology of Marriage." The Devil's Theology of Marriage. So I said in the beginning that if devil was to live amongst us and lead a normal human life, have a profession, he would be a psychotherapist. Would be a psychotherapist, asking people to do things contradictory things, Be yourself. Don't be an idiot. Do as you like. Love your wife. Love your neighbor. Love your opponent. Why? How can I do? I was about to leave psychoanalysis when I met Father Porphyrios precisely because of this. Because psychoanalysis knows that narcissism is not something that can be abolished. We have to accept a certain percentage of narcissism. Otherwise, there's depression. But no one knows, and no one can tell you what are the limits of the accepted narcissism. There are no criteria, psychological criteria at all. No such criteria. We're going to put a semicolon and say, oh, narcissism up to here. And then I become, what is the English word for philalilia, loving for the others. I'm loving the others and forget myself. How can you forget yourself? This is why devil wants to entangle people, to confuse people. So you could be a psychotherapist, asking them things that cannot be put together, to put them together. That means, and a part of political philosophy today, ask precisely, precisely this. People to ask, different and contradictory things, things that are in contradiction between them. This is why, I get to give an example. I read recently a book by Susan Neiman, which is called a good book. Woke is not left. Woke, the woke movement, is not left. So there he says that, woke movement is a tribal movement, and it's not, now Neiman lives in Germany. She was professor at Yale for some years. Left has to do with universality, and that means a universal ethics, full stop. But how can we find this ethics again? It's against the source. She says, I'm an atheist. We can find this, this ethics coming from the Enlightenment. But how? In my book on totalitarianism here, I try to prove that in the Enlightenment we have a total, contradictory misunderstanding of nature between Grotius and Hobbes. The first endorses nature as a source of meanings for all, in a canonistic way. Hobbes speaks of nature as something that it is in my disposition to use in this and that way. So how can we derive, again, an ethics that's our way somehow to do things that are in apparent contradiction? This is the problem, and this remains the problem in the West. It's an unsolved problem. The Enlightenment failed to solve the problem. What is nature? They have put nature in the place of God. God does not exist. We have nature now. Nature. But this nature is canonistic. Can we derive, can we draw, laws of nature commonly accepted? Or it is just a way of using myself as an actual being. And then, of course,
it's yes.
Father, what I want to say is again that we do not have today sources, commonly accepted sources of meaning in order to put these things together. Be yourself, love your neighbor. Accept the other, accept yourself. There's no way to do this. No way anymore. And finally, it becomes just an alchemy of, things that each one of us thinks that somehow can, in this sense or another, be accepted by others. But then finally they are not accepted. This is the problem, and this started, of course, also with Kantian ethics. That's a huge problem for the West, for us.
Father Nicholas, this battle between the nominal and the real. I mean, we're trapped in a kind of Manichaean, Zoroastrian struggle in the West. The nominalists and the realist, or nominalism and realism at each other's throats. It's also technology versus science. That's another manifestation, because if the purpose of studying natures is just technology, then there's nothing canonical. Science, but in the war between science and technology, science is losing for sure, and it really is, on the whole, the nominalists have the upper hand. Now, but if you were to say, how does a person, or a saint at any rate, in practice overcome this kind of the narcissism versus, the narcissism of, the nominalist versus the brotherly love of the realist? It seems like you need some kind of a ritual of periodically renouncing both and just falling in love with Christ. And it's some kind of immersion in this ecstatic relationship with Christ, where this war between the nominal and the real within myself is resolved.
Absolutely, yes.
And I become a person. And not a person in the sense that, you said, 20 minutes ago, where the person is just another name for the individual narcissism trying to be free of nature, but person as, I take person to be, Mircea Eliada's sacred pillar, that the person is somehow our capacity to unite, earth, sky, and the chthonic, in one. The sacred pillar is the person, but I don't really know in practice, though, how this happens. I mean, I just kind of sense that people like Father Sophrony, whom I met, but not maybe as well as you did, or certainly I don't think I knew him as well as you knew Paisius and Porphyrios. Somehow they do overcome that, right? And what is like the shorthand way of that, of overcoming the narcissism versus other regarding?
I said previously, distribution, participation as distribution. That is and of course, this has to do with our encounter with Christ. Otherwise, it cannot happen. We somehow see the Christ doing this in his church. And this distribution, it's something that has to do with the very identity of the church. Distribution of charismata, of gifts. Distribution. No one holds anything for, We spoke of saints. All the saints have a common characteristic. They are men of love, of deep, deep, deep love for the others. And I think that this is why they are given charismata and gifts, precisely because of this love. Otherwise, you will be destroyed by the charismata, and you will destroy others.
Yes. Yes.
So they had an incomprehensible and a limitless love for the concrete human person, because this little man, is Christ's brother, is Christ himself for them. And they felt it because they knew Christ's love. They knew that Christ loves them and him. So this love cannot be divided. God loves us as one. He does not love us separately as good individuals because we're the number one. He loves also the number two. He loves also the same number 3, number 4, number 20, and number 100. And this pedagogy of love story. It's this having everything through the others and not through myself. If I want to have everything through myself, I possess. I take things from the others. If I understand that everything is a gifted person, and then in the church we understand it clearly, you have everything that you need, all that you need through the others, and you love the others. Because you love the others, you have also their gifts. You have everything in this sense, and in this way you have both. In a way, a good sense of narcissism and a good sense of love of the others, loving the others. You have all. This is the narcissist's dream: to have all, possess everything, without possessing the others, because the others are giving to you, and you are giving to them. You are giving to them. You are giving to them. There's a story on this used both by ancient authors, biblical authors, and some modern theologians. What is heaven and what is hell? There's an ascetic that wants to find out what is heaven and what is hell. He asks his angel, please, my dear angel, my protector, show me what is heaven and what is hell. One night the angel comes and takes him by the hand and said, let me show you what the hell is. He takes him to a room, a very large room with a large table, and people sitting around the table with very, very, long spoons, and there's food in the middle of the table. And they try to reach the food, but the spoons are very long, so they hit one another, and they are hungry. No one, is able to get food. So,
All right. Sorry about that.
He takes him to another a similar room with the same table, the same food in the middle, the spoons, and everyone is happy. That says, this is the paradise, this is heaven. What's the difference? The difference was that, everyone was feeding the person sitting, on the other side of the table. Psychologically speaking, it seems easy to do, but it's very difficult. When you are hungry of being loved, of being honored, of being understood, to give all these things to the other, and not press the other, or take all these things through a certain, act of violence, or violent act from the other. So in this sense, you create gratitude. And when you create gratitude, you create meaning. This is the meaningful. And that means that you have all the others. You have, which is very, very important, because you have distribution, you have participation, you take food, and you have distribution. And through distribution, you have participation. First you give, and then you are given by the one who, through friendship and gratitude, feels you as his source of life. We see that the biblical thought has many things to offer still. And I personally believe that this sort of illuminated Christianity is a Christianity for the future. Humanity is exhausted today. But all of us who deal with philosophy and psychology, we know this very well. I think that we agree. I think that you perhaps agree, Dr. Patitsas, on this.
My current project is writing a little bit about social ethics, and I'm extremely concerned with this definition of economics as the allocation of scarce resources, because it pits everyone in a war. This question of scarcity, Not necessarily, because you can see that, okay, now we're going to discuss how we're going to share this scarcity, and maybe that's an event of communion. But it skips a prior step of gratitude, that there should be resources at all. And in the case of economic development, what we're concerned with is not the reallocation of scarcity, but somehow the generation of new abundance. And what you said a moment ago, Father Nicholas, about how gratitude creates meaning, I mean, that's a treasure. That's a treasure of a statement. I mean, that's your Eucharistic ontology, but it's just a treasure of a thought. Thank you.
Thank you too. So, have we finished? Or
I have perhaps one more question, if you're up for it, the both of you.
We might have to wait for a part 2. But what is the question? Because it's been 90 minutes, and your future viewers will be impossible exhausted to stay beyond.
Well,
what is
people watch 4-hour Joe Rogan commentaries, so I think they might be able to handle it. But yes. I'll pitch it, and then you guys can decide whether you want to address it or not. It has to do with gender and sexuality as they relate to the Christian self. With this distinction between nature and person, sometimes marriage is denigrated as necessity, and monasticism becomes incoherent because it just becomes this individualistic ecstasis from nature. And it also seems to create a backdoor for ontologies that are amenable to contemporary models of gender fluidity by liberating person from nature and then just saying person's totally fluid. And people will adduce St. Paul saying, there are neither male nor female in Christ and things like that. So can you talk, both of you, a little bit about what the meaning of gender and sexuality are as they relate to the Christian self, both eschatologically and as we understand it now?
Well, Nicholas, I will defer.
Let the Americans start, because we are still free to talk about this. I don't know if you are as free as we are. Still,
maybe not.
I mean, I do think about, I feel like sometimes in podcasts I come across, critical of my nation and my people, and I hate to do that. I think, let me say that growing up as an Orthodox Christian in the West, in many senses, you feel that you are an outsider to all traditions, because certainly you're not Roman Catholic, you're not Protestant, you can see those, but your experience of Orthodoxy is somehow limited as well, because Orthodoxy is so holistic that absent, a larger social context, it's one more thing. I mean, I'm an American, which means that on some level, I'm a Scots-Irish Calvinist, observing Orthodoxy.
Anglo-Protestant.
Jane Jacobs said something. She said that the medical practice in the 18th century of bloodletting came from Europe, but that when it came to America, we took it to an extreme. We took, we're believers in an idea as Americans, and we're going to apply that idea, sometimes without mercy. And I feel that somehow this is happening with gender. Certainly it happened with urban planning, that we just went crazy with it, with the destruction of traditional neighborhoods and the construction of these fantasy projects that were so anti-human in practice. So I hate to see, I think, these gender surgeries, that they seem like, our modern approach, the modern day equivalent of lobotomy or something as a way to heal mental illness in the 50s. So many people are suffering because of this intellectual consistency of which we just we just take that. Beyond this, though, I mean, I think you can see, for example, that I don't want to say more. I don't want to say more because I feel like I've said. I don't want to be too critical of the West. Sometimes you sort of see on a folk level, Roman Catholics in America. There's a kind of triumphalism. They see that the madness that Protestantism can descend into. But I think all of us need to think, in terms of repentance. Okay, to what extent did an excessive realism in this empire of the church drive people to these nominalist extremes? And not to let them off the hook, because I think even for the traumatized person berserking, there's a tremendous hit of egotism there. But what did we get wrong about gender that now we're going to this other extreme to try to annihilate it, even surgically, chemically? It's a heartbreaking thing. Yeah, I'll limit for now my comment to that. Yeah.
Father Loudovikos, if you have any comments, and then we'll come to a close.
Look, I am a professor of religious studies at hermeneutical religion at the University of Ioannina, and one of my tasks there is to teach religions in dialogue. Okay, not only Christianity, not only. So it is very easy for me to prove, for example, in Chinese philosophy. Okay, like classical Chinese philosophy, Meng Che, Kung Fu, and all the rest. We have ontological elements in creation, like yin and yang. That means for the Chinese is male, female, and male. Okay. Or in my book here on totalitarianism, I read from Pythagoras, who have, as he says, 10 couples of ontological dyads. 10 couples. Finitude and infinite. One and many. Left and right. Direct or circle. Light and darkness. Good and bad. Male and female. You see, for the classical thought, male and female exist precisely because nature wants this to happen. You understand? It's very clear. This is why Michel Foucault, in his book on truth and, which are courses that he gave in Collège de France, Truth and Subjectivity, proves, I think convincingly, that the ancients finally denied homosexuality. Finally. So I think to accept it as a private practice, okay. And another thing to accept it philosophically. Foucault, who was a homosexual himself, as you know, in this book, I don't know if I think that it exists in English. I found it in French, and now it appeared also in Greek. It's a very important book because he shows for what reasons the ancients finally, philosophically, a series of texts, dealing with this, rejected homosexuality precisely because, for reasons having to do with nature, because simply it does not exist, as a permanent practice in nature. Okay, you cannot say this is a lesbian cat or this dog is a gay for all his life, not, an attitude of the moment, you understand? But permanently. So, once again, Christianity gives us this freedom from nature in the sense that we are images of an absolute being which cannot be identified with nature. This is one thing. This is why I usually say that all the gender discussion is totally Christian. All the discussion about gender can happen only in a Christian context. And we see this. There's not Hindu account of, there's not Chinese account or Buddhist account of gender. No, we don't have. Of course, Islamic, not at all, because they are in their metaphysics are, Aristotelian, Neoplatonic, but they are not as well as biblical. Yeah? They cannot even think about it. So we have the Christian, this Christian discussion or this Christian, now, practice or the event of gender. Now, what I have to say is precisely this: that we have this freedom indeed in the Christian context. This is given to us, but again, this freedom has to unite itself with God's wisdom. That means we are free, but we are not justified to be free, because the absolute freedom would be the explosion of a nuclear bomb. This is the absolute freedom. A nuclear bomb explodes. We need freedom balanced and connected with wisdom. That means we need to give things the meaning initially God wanted to give them. Now, if there are personal deviations, this is another thing. Church has an economia, you understand? But not in the sense of creating a new ontology of things. This is why the church in Greece denied the homosexual marriage. Okay, why? Because we do not have such sort of marriage, never in human history. Whatever religion, whatever philosophy you take, whatever rite you take, you can never find a definition of marriage as a union, between two same-sex people. Understand? So this is happens today. It's one thing to deal with the personal deviation of someone who is searching to unite his personal freedom with wisdom. Am I clear? It is another thing to establish any sort of deviation as wisdom.
All right. I feel like that was very lucid.
Eh?
I think that was very lucid.
Am I clear?
Yeah.
Am I clear? Am I clear? Two different things. Two different things.
Right.
Homosexual marriage for the church, for the Orthodox Church, this is what the Synod decided, and I totally agree, is not a marriage in the sense that marriage was, for thousands of years in the human race. It's a new thing. That means we cannot create a new ontology. Yin, double yin, yang, and another thing of yang. Male, female, plus two females, minus less or less 9%, 9% female, 8% male. We do not know this, how to do this. It's just something, it's a fiction, it's something, a creation of our freedom. Okay. But freedom has to be wise. It must unite itself with wisdom in order for things to work finally. To get to what, to become divine, to be sanctified. Once Father Patitsas told me, when you want to make holy water, okay, you take clear water, okay, to the church, from a fountain, from a tap, from there. You don't get water with mud from the street. Why? Not because God miraculously cannot turn this water mixed with mud, into holy water. No, but because what God created is water, clear water. So you take what He created to the church and you make holy water. And now I think that I have in myself, in my mind, I'm clear. And I have spoken about these things many times in Greece, with many, many thousands of views and
Sure.
I mean, it's one thing to deal as a spiritual father with a certain deviation, certain man who is, repeat it again, tries to somehow connect his freedom with this or that degree of God's wisdom. It's one thing. It's another thing to say that every sort of freedom of choice creates beings, new beings. I don't think that we are allowed to do the second. Yeah.
No, I think it's very clear. These are it's berserk. It's berserk. It's the person who is now stepped outside the city, and it's a hard road to live. I mean, we're just mortal bodies, and we age and we get sick, and we cannot do it. We just cannot live a self-deified life.
Absolutely. I like this very much. Self-deified life. Yes, I like this. That's the whole truth. Yeah, this conveys what I have also in myself. Yeah. Self-deified life, and I think that's the illusion today. That's the illusion of all our Greek Western, as I call it. In my books, I never speak of Western and East. I speak of a Christian Greek Western world, and I try to find convergences, not only divergences there in my book. So, yes, the temptation for our present situation is precisely this: to dream of a self-deified life, and this is wrong. This can create a great disaster in humanity. One can feel it in the air, coming in the air. As the old song Phil Collins says, I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
All right. Well, it feels like a good place to end. I'll leave it up to you if you have any closing statements, Father. I know the second volume of your Analogical Identities was just published a couple of months ago. I'll include a link to that in the description of the video, and any other work you might want to talk about, or
you want to talk about the book?
No. I'm just saying if you would like to mention anything you're working on or any upcoming translations.
This work is a three-volume work,
right?
Which called Analogical Identities: The Creation of the Christian Self. Volume 1 has the title Beyond Spirituality and Mysticism, the patristic era. The second volume has the title Intermeaningfullness: Self-Catholicization, Metanosis, and Christian Theology. There's a third volume dedicated to theology of the unconscious. So in this second volume, I'm trying to define the content of what I described as analogical identities in the first version. So, and I have some findings there. I don't know. It's a book a little difficult, academically speaking. I cannot summarize it in just a few words, but I said things here and there while we were discussing.
Yeah.
So that.
Okay. And Dr. Patitsas, anything you would like to mention? I know is your film still showing?
What?
So I think we're going to be looking for some kind of a partnership here in Greece to show Amphilochios, Saints of Patmos. It's a 30-minute documentary short. We'd like to get it on the big screen at some point in Greece. So I hope that transpires. Yeah, I thought about no, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, just
okay, perfect.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Father Nikolaos. Much. Yeah, for your time, both of you. I'll go ahead and end the recording.
I thank you too. I think exceptionally, Dr. Patitsas, for this very fruitful discussion. Very grateful,
Father. So yeah, it's such an honor for me to be with someone of your stature. Thank you.